It's an interesting scene that's going on, and I don't think we can truly understand the impact. But the road to Jerusalem is now almost complete for Jesus. You see, he rides in on that donkey. He gets on the back of the donkey and he rides into Jerusalem, which is the symbol everybody knew. That meant that he was going to become king. He was going to overthrow. He was going to become king, and the Roman Empire was going to fall. So the disciples kind of like forgot everything he'd been telling them for the past couple months and kind of, maybe we misunderstood. Okay, now we're riding into Jerusalem. We're going to do this. So they get really up and happy, and they're triumphant. And the inner circle then goes to the upper room, and there's this celebration of Passover going on. And John records the exact moment when the mood changed. Because you see, Jesus stands up, and he takes off his garments, and he picks up a towel, and he binds himself with the towel. He girds himself with the towel. And he gets a bucket of water in the pitcher, and he starts washing the feet of his 11, or 12 at that point, washing the feet of these men. The shame they must have felt, how embarrassed they were initially, because here, this is the Messiah. What is he doing washing our feet? And then it gets worse. And Jesus says then, one of you here, you're going to betray me. And so that also throws them off. Now they're getting even more nervous. Of course, Jesus had been trying to tell them for months that this was going to happen, that the end was coming. But tonight, he says things like, a little while longer and the world will see me no more. Whoa, now they're really getting scared. And then the final blow. He says, the ruler of this world is coming for me. Is coming for me. So now they get it. He's not going to overthrow the Roman Empire. He has no intention of doing so. Can you just picture the pain on their faces and the fear in their hearts? Eventually, after Judas has left, there are 11 dejected men and some of the inner circle women. They get up and they follow Jesus down the stairs out of the upper room. And they walk with him through Jerusalem. And he avoids the temple because there's celebration and there's joy coming from the temple. It's Passover. So he avoids that. And he goes out through the temple gate. And then he turns left. And he goes into the Kidron Valley. And he passes into the vineyard. And he passes into the vineyard, and he comes into this spectacular vineyard in the valley. And then they walk in single file between the rows, neatly tended of grapes, and the smell must have been amazing. Plants that have been bearing fruit for generations and generations on the way to the Mount of Olives. Ahead is the Mount of Olives and arrest and his death. Behind him, everybody hates him. They're searching for him. Judas is gone now, and he's told them where to find him. It's all in place. There's nothing he can do. And Jesus stops between like a gap in the rows where he could get everybody together. And the disciples gather around him, and I can just see the torches flickering in their eyes. And Jesus stops and starts to address them. Jesus knows these are the last teaching. This is it. No more teaching after this. It's done. What is the last thing he's going to say to them? I can't imagine knowing that I'm going to die and having that last time with people that I love. And Jesus stops and wants to tell them about the vineyard, to give them this message. He will continue to model. He's going to continue to model how to live when all this is happening to him. He's going to model within 24 hours how to die. But right now are the last words that he can give them. Jesus must give the final teaching to the 11 plus who are charged with carrying on, changing the entire world. What's the last thing he talks about? Grapes. And what he is actually doing now is giving people that love him and that are going to carry on, not words on how to carry on and speak to other people, What he's trying to give them right now is how for them to carry on within themselves. This is a private teaching on how to do it, on how to be able to navigate this world. Because their world's not going to be great, and our futures are, we don't know what's going to happen. It's all about, Jesus says, alignment. It's all about alignment. The vineyard here is the world. The vine dresser is God. He's in charge of the world, in charge of the universe. He makes sure that the people are okay. That's the vine dresser's job. That's God's job. The vine is Jesus, and the branches are the humans, and the grapes are the amazing result of the energy when everything lines up. If everything works together. What we might think of as the trunk of the vine is actually, that looks like a trunk, but it's actually what they call the vine. That is what Jesus calls himself. That's the connection to the earth, to what the vine dresser does to the earth, and he nourishes it, and he feeds it water and stuff, and it goes up that beautiful, ancient, gnarled vine there. And you can see a few branches in there and the grapes hanging off of it. That's actually the vine. It is the anchor. It is what grounds us to God and to the world. It nourishes and feeds us. Off the vine come those branches where we receive the nourishment and energy from the vine, and we get it from the vine dresser. If it is healthy, there is an explosion of grapes. Just an absolute explosion of grapes. For the purposes of pleasure to the wine dresser. For the purposes of the wine dresser being able to give joy to others. For the purposes of the seeds, so that more vines can be planted. It all comes together, but it has to be aligned. Jesus says, as the Father abides in me and I in you and you are in the Father, the result of it is an overflowing of love, an overflowing of grapes. We tend to think that producing much fruit has been said over the centuries as meaning producing disciples. But I cannot find a single commentary that says that that's what it means. It means to most of the scholars or any scholar that I've read, that it actually means we produce love. Love is the fruit of the vine. We produce it, and that's what we're supposed to do. But I have always heard it, though, to mean to be more disciples. Grapes that come from a healthy alignment of God, Jesus, and you. And the overflowing becomes the grapes of love. Jesus says, I appointed you to go and bear much love, much fruit that will last. I am giving you these commandments so that you will love one another. That entire reading was about love. But when you think about it, there's all these questions that we have in our lives. And like even Pilate says, what is truth? That's a heavy question. And the writer of Ecclesiastes says, what's new under the sun? And philosophers, since written time has begun, has said, why are we here? What is our purpose? What are we doing here? I kind of like more concrete. I don't like those abstract philosophical questions. I don't like to spend an evening trying to figure that out because I feel like I have the answers to those. I want something concrete. I want you to be able to give me something concrete. I want someone to feed me some practical solutions. And Jesus says, go and love. Go love. Okay, how? What is love? I work every day with people, and I tell you, every email you get from me, I say, love Dee. I say it all the time. I love you. I love you. But what is love? How am I doing with that? It's a good self-examination. It's such an abstract word, and it's actually a high action verb. Paul worked also on trying to define love. He tried to explain what Jesus was talking about, because obviously people are going, what do you mean by love? And what does all this come to? In Galatians, it says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's 9 of those babies up there. How are you doing on all those? Do you ever self-examine yourself and see how that's going? We still don't get it. Okay, love. You want to know what the fruit looks like. Jesus says, take me. He says, look at me. And then Paul says again, look at me. Paul says, look at me. And Paul does this thing great in 1 Corinthians 13. I don't know if you understand that, the love passage that we always read in weddings and stuff. But the love passage is Jesus talking about himself. Now, Jesus doesn't like to talk about himself. And Jesus says about himself, you know what? He says, I have all these gifts, and I'm going to admit it to you. I've got gifts. He says, I'm a public speaker. He says, I'm a prophet. He says, I have a huge face. I'm terribly generous. I have all these gifts from God. But even if you have amazing gifts from God, he says, they're worth nothing. They mean absolutely nothing if they don't come from the base of love. If the position that you're doing all the gifts that you have don't come from a foundation of love, you have done nothing. You have accomplished nothing. Even if your intention is to do these things to help other people, if it's not, how do you want to say it, filtered through the eyes of God, coming through the heart of God, under the wing of God, however you want to say it, because it's said 1,000 different ways. You have to come at it through the love of God. Because the fruit of that Spirit is patience when you don't want to be patient. This is the one from 1 Corinthians. And I'm telling you, when you're at your last strand and you can't stand it any longer and you still show patience, I fail at that one all the time. When you're kind when you don't want to be kind. You know, that sign. I've told you this before. I had this sign in the back of my classroom that said, what did it say? It said, the hardest to love is the one who needs it the most. The one who's turning those buttons and pushing you as far as you can go. That's the one that's seeking the love. That's the reason. And to be kind when you just don't want to do it. It says you can't be envious. Oh, and then come all the knots. I put them in gray. It says not be envious. You know, it's like when somebody else gets promoted and it really should have been you. Or when somebody else picks up the guitar in 1 week and do more than you can do in 2 years. You're not supposed to envy that. You're supposed to celebrate it. We're not allowed to be rude. We're not allowed to insist on our own way. We're not allowed to be irritable. You know, I have a lot of work to do if those are the definitions of love. If those are the definitions of love, I'm kind of falling short. And so saying love, Dee, in all my emails is not enough. That's not enough. It doesn't work that day. The disciples, right at that moment when he's telling them all that, had to feel kind of squeamish too. I mean, we all know how Peter was impulsive and actually stepped on himself all the time and stepped on Jesus all the time. And we have Philip who was that strong-minded, who just couldn't get it straight and was always challenging Jesus. We had Timothy, who made demands on Jesus at all times. All of them are standing around in that vineyard, not smelling the grapes at the moment, but thinking about how they fall short. And then in just a little while, within like 4 hours, all the disciples are going to run as fast as they can away. They're going to deny that they ever knew Jesus. They're going to disbelieve and feel like they've wasted 3 years and why have they been so stupid. They're going to huddle in fear for 48 hours. I'm telling you guys, we have great examples to follow. You see, Jesus didn't pick the perfect, but he enables those who want to get themselves aligned with God. Eventually, they will remember this conversation in the vineyard. And it will give them the tools that they need to go in love and just love and love. It wasn't the words that they said, those 11 and the plus. It was never the words they said. It was their action. It was how they lived their lives. He said, go love. And you can't do that. You can't do it on your own. It requires that alignment with God. It requires God, Jesus, you overflow grapes. That's what must come first, is the intentionality. And when you successfully love God through the grapes and loving each other, that's when he receives the love back to him. It doesn't happen by rote. It doesn't come and happen by coming to church on Sundays. It doesn't come accidentally at all. It happens only with intentionality. Wake up every morning and ask God to guide your feet in love. The branches cannot produce feet if detached from the vine. Keep yourselves attached to the vine. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.